Pope Francis has passed away at the age of 88. I think we've all known that he has been in very poor health lately. We saw that he spent several weeks at Gemelli Hospital in Rome. He was released, but we all knew his health condition was very shaky. And so he passed away about 6 hours ago. We're going to take a look at the cardinal who made the announcement. We're also going to examine his legacy and see what all he did as Pope, and even before he was Pope, what all he did then as well. And then we're going to talk about what is next for the Catholic Church. What happens whenever a pope passes away? What exactly is the process? What stage are we currently in that process, and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to take a look at today. Please, of course, pray for the repose of his soul. I see Appalachian Catholic in the chat is saying, "Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him." Again, keep in mind, um, whether you are a huge fan of Pope Francis or not, whether you were critical of him or not, please keep in mind it's important to pray for him. So I ask that everybody do that. Now, let me go ahead and share my screen and show you what the Cardinal announced at the passing away of Pope Francis. Gonna share my screen right now so that you can hear and see it. I will read the translation for you, for those of y'all who are listening by audio only. So here is what they just posted a few hours ago, making the announcement.
Carissimi fratelli et sorelle,
It says, "Dear brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow, I must announce the death of our Holy Father Francis.
profondo dolore devo annunciare la morte del nostro Santo Padre Francesco. Alle ore
It says at 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to
7:35 di questa mattina, il Vescovo di Roma Francesco è tornato alla casa del
the house of the Father.
Padre. La sua vita tutta intera è
It says his entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his church.
stata dedicato al servizio del Signore e della sua Chiesa. Ci ha insegnato a
It continues, he taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity and courage.
vivere i valori del Vangelo con fedeltà, coraggio e amore universale.
And universal love, especially toward the poorest and most marginalized.
In modo particolare a favore dei più poveri ed emarginati. Con immensa gratitudine per il suo esempio
With immense gratitude for his example as a true disciple of the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis,
de vero discepolo del Signore Gesù. Raccomandiamo l'anima del Papa Francesco all'infinito
to the
amore
infinite merciful love of the
misericordioso
triune God.
di Dio uno e trino. Grazie.
Okay, so that is the announcement from Cardinal Kevin Farrell, who made the breaking news here, shocking news, even though, again, I think we all knew it was going to happen. This happened the day after Easter. Wow. But it was actually a blessing that he was able to make it to this Easter. But to come the day after such a joyful day of celebration hits pretty hard. And so let me tell you where we're at in the process here with Pope Francis and the process of a pope passing away. I'm going to pull it up so we can kind of have an idea of what all is going on. So All right, so this is actually coming from a post that I saw on Facebook that I thought was pretty helpful because it summarizes the process. There's a number of stages when a pope passes away. First of all, you have stage one, confirmation of his death. The individual, Brendan Malone, who's posting it, says traditionally there is a ceremonial calling of the Pope's baptismal name 3 times to confirm that he passed. Stage two, which is where we're at, is the official notification and announcement of the Pope's death, which begins a period of mourning and funeral preparations. Stage three is the funeral and burial, which usually happens within a week of his death, during which time the body will lie in a state in Rome for the public to pay their last respects. After the funeral, the Pope is normally buried beneath St. Peter's in Rome, although Francis revealed in 2023 that he has to be buried at Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome, one of the main principal churches in Rome. Stage four is the sede vacante. The seat is vacant, which basically means all Catholics right now don't have a pope. So the see is vacant, sede vacante. So you'll see a lot of people put in the chat stuff like, all Catholics are sede vacantes now. That's true until the next pope is elected. And this period begins when the pope dies. And this time, all the major decisions are put on hold, which is also why a very important canonization was just placed on hold right now. All major decisions are placed on hold, barring those related to the election process for the new pope. The College of Cardinals takes responsibility for caretaking the church through this time. Stage five is the conclave within 2 to 3 weeks of the pope's dying. The cardinals gather in a conclave in the Sistine Chapel to prayerfully discern and elect a new pope under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. This process is carried out under a pledge of secrecy on the part of the cardinals. And then stage six, the election of a new pope, which can only happen when a 2/3 majority is reached. Black smoke from the chimney in St. Peter's means the majority has not been reached. In white smoke, when you see that comes out, that means a new pope has been chosen. Then you will have the announcement of that pope, and it will be done very publicly, where someone will come out and they will announce who the pope is by name. They will say, Habemus Papam, we have a pope, and then they will bring him out. So that's kind of the process. Right now, we're in stage two of effectively announcing the death of the pope. Stage three will be burial, which Pope Francis just recently reformed that process. It's been reformed many times, but he reformed the process of the burial of a pope, likely knowing that he was coming to the end of his own earthly life. And he made it a lot simpler. Before, it was much more expanded. In this particular case, he wanted to make it simpler. And so we're likely going to see something more simple compared to what we've seen with, say, John Paul II. Okay, so let me now move on here to Vatican News that has announced the passing away of Pope Francis. Let's see what they have to say. Pope Francis has died on Easter Monday, age 88. At 9:45 a.m., Cardinal Kevin Farrell, Carmelengo of the Holy Roman Church, announced the death of Pope Francis from the Casa Santa Marta with these words: "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow, I announce the death of Pope Francis." That's what we just saw on video. The director of the Holy See Press Office, Matteo Bruni, told journalists later on Monday that the late Pope's body could be transferred to St. Peter's Basilica on Wednesday morning so that the faithful may pray before his mortal remains. And so there will be an opportunity for people to give their farewells to Pope Francis, likely in St. Peter's Basilica. And of course, it's going to be absolutely packed with numerous people, from incredibly important dignitaries to just everyone else. Everyone will have the opportunity to be able to come by St. Peter's and, you know, pray for him and also, say their goodbyes. The translation of the Holy Father's mortal remains to the Vatican Basilica for the veneration of all the faithful may take place on the morning of Wednesday, April 23rd, according to the arrangements that shall be determined and communicated tomorrow, following the first congregation of the cardinals. So the cardinals are going to gather together to discuss this, and also all of the cardinals who are able to vote for the next pope will be called to Rome, so that they can gather together and then discuss the election of another pontiff, and then of course they'll actually go into the process itself and elect one. The Pope was admitted to Gemelli Hospital on Friday, February 14th, after suffering from a bout of bronchitis for several days. Pope Francis's clinical situation gradually worsened, and his doctors diagnosed bilateral pneumonia on Tuesday, February 18th. After 38 days in the hospital, the Pope returned to his Vatican residence at the Casa Santa Marta to continue his recovery. It says in 1957, in his early 20s, Pope Francis underwent surgery in his native Argentina to remove a portion of his lung that had been affected by a severe respiratory infection. As he aged, Pope Francis frequently suffered bouts of respiratory illnesses, even canceling a planned visit to the United Arab Emirates in November of 2023 due to the influenza and lung inflammation. In April 2024, the late Pope Francis approved an updated edition of the liturgical book for papal funeral rites. That's what I was just telling you about moments ago, which will guide the funeral mass, which has yet to be announced. The second edition of the funeral rite introduces several new elements, including how the Pope's mortal remains are to be handled after death. The ascertainment of death takes place in the chapel rather than in the room where he died, and his body is immediately placed in the coffin. I have seen some pictures already online of a pope in a coffin, and I don't know if it was Benedict or Pope Francis that they were showing because the face was covered, but I think we're all probably going to start seeing some pictures like that emerge. According to Archbishop Ravelli, master of apostolic ceremonies, the late Pope Francis had requested that the funeral rites be simplified and focused on expressing the faith of the church in the risen body of Christ. The renewed rite, said the Archbishop, seeks to emphasize even more that the funeral of the Roman pontiff is that of a pastor and a disciple of Christ, and not of a powerful person of this world. And that's what I meant by he wanted to kind of simplify it. Which also reminds me, I want to show you this video I posted yesterday. This is a video of Pope Francis and J.D. Vance. I don't know if this is the last video we have of Pope Francis. I mean, he has cameras on him 24/7. I would imagine. So I suspect there's probably some other footage, but to my knowledge, this is the last video that we have of Pope Francis. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I posted this yesterday, and I was watching J.D. Vance meet him because he was there at the Easter Mass with Pope Francis in the Vatican. And he got to meet him, and I was watching the video, and I was thinking, gosh, Pope Francis just he doesn't look bad. And some people were interpreting it as like he just doesn't like JD Vance or something. And I thought, no, it's clearly a health issue here. He looks like he's suffering. So it was really sad to see that. But watch this video, and you can kind of see what I'm saying here, where I think we could all kind of tell there's some serious difficulties that he was going through, and even just meeting someone like JD Vance. Here we go.
Pray for you every day. God bless you. So good to see you. Good morning. How are you?
Find yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Not been feeling great, but it's good to see you in better health.
Anche buona Pasquale. E dice,
Grazie Santo Padre.
Thank you.
these are for your children.
Okay, thank you.
These are the gifts. These are also gifts for you.
Thank you. It's
The
beautiful.
Vatican tie, and then the rosaries for your wife, the white for your children, and the red one is for. Thank you very much for your visit.
Of course. And thank you for seeing me. Pray for you every day. God bless you.
Io prego per lei ogni giorno, che Dio la benedica. Grazie Santo Padre.
Happy Easter.
Gosh, poor guy. It looked like he was really suffering there, and I hate that for him. But now I know that he's no longer suffering. So there's good news in that, but it's also a very sad occasion, obviously. And a lot of people are going to be in mourning for many, many days to come. And my heart goes out to everyone in this time, obviously. And I feel absolutely horrible for him, because I know he went through a lot of suffering, a lot of criticism, a lot of persecution, in various ways. And so again, my heart goes out to him for having to go through all that for so many years, but also I'm happy that he no longer has to suffer and go through all that. And I suspect there was also a lot of moments where he suffered that we don't know about right now, and maybe we'll find out in the future. And I suspect there's also going to be things that later generations will find out, because his archives won't be released for, I think, another 70 years. I want to say it's 70 years before the papal archives of a pope after their passing is released to the public. And I think most recently they had Pope Pius XII in his archive that was released, and people kind of got to look more into his situation, and more information comes out. I suspect, 70 years from now, people are going to find out a lot about Pope Francis that they weren't aware of, stuff that was going on behind the scenes, and that might reshape the way people perceive him at that time. But okay, so let's now take a look at some live updates here from how the world is reacting to Pope Francis passing away, and various comments that people are making about him, from the Dalai Lama to Bishop Barron. So let's actually take a look at some of those. I'm going to share my screen so you can see. Okay. Dalai Lama, Francis dedicated himself to the service of others. The Dalai Lama Monday mourned the passing of Pope Francis, urging the world to take up the late Pope's example of service and generosity. Buddhist leader wrote to Archbishop of Girelli, the Apostolic Nuncio to India, to express his condolences. Bishop Barron, Pope Francis was a great pastor who brought others to the gospel. Winona, Rochester Bishop Robert Barron on Monday mourned Pope Francis's passing, hailing the late Pope as a great pastor who preached mercy and evangelization. Barron noted the Pope's characterization of the Church as a field hospital to those wounded by our postmodern relativistic society. And that's kind of maybe one of his most famous references or quotes of Pope Francis. The Church is a hospital for the sick, something along those lines. Pope Francis had a keen awareness of the destructiveness of sin, and he encouraged the Church to show the world the merciful face of Christ. And that's one of the reasons why I named this stream A Legacy of Mercy. That was a huge emphasis of Pope Francis in anything that he would say, whether it's an encyclical, a homily, a speech, just whatever. There was a huge emphasis on mercy, forgiveness, love, but there was also a huge emphasis on reform. And I think those are the two things that really characterize this pontificate. And, in upcoming streams, we're going to evaluate this pontificate a little bit more closely. We're not going to do that today, But in upcoming streams, we will talk about that, how there was an emphasis on mercy, but also an emphasis on reform. And we're going to see some examples of that. Sydney Archbishop, Pope's death at Easter, very special. He says, it's a special sign of grace during the holy season. Speaking to press at St. Mary's Cathedral in Sydney, Fisher, Archbishop Fisher, recalled Pope John Paul II's death in 2005 around the Easter season. Oh, I honestly, it's been so long, I didn't realize his passing was also in the Easter season. Wow. And I think that Pope Francis has given similar witness that he persevered through his old age and sickness, kept trying to serve God and serve people to the end, the prelate added. I mean, he made it through Holy Week. Wow. He made it through Holy Week, made it all the way through and through Easter Sunday. It continues, and for him to die at Easter is very special because, as he said himself yesterday, this is when we Christians celebrate eternal life. Argentinian President Milei, a true honor to know the first pope from Argentina. He says, despite differences that seem minor today, having been able to know him in his kindness and wisdom was a true honor for me. European bishops are reacting to his passing. Pope Francis has tirelessly led the church with courage and strength. With profound gratitude and emotion, we remember our Holy Father Francis, who tirelessly led the church with courage and strength through years marked by multiple crises all over the world. Yeah, and we're going to talk, like I said, in upcoming streams about a lot of those crises that we've seen in the church and Pope Francis's involvement, interaction, responses to all that. Pope Francis was truly one of the great witnesses of our times, beloved and respected even by non-believers, and whose first concern was always directed towards the most fragile members of God's creation. His voice spoke to hearts with simplicity and depth through concrete gestures of love, listening, and closeness. In this Jubilee year, one of the Holy Father's final great efforts, we are grateful to the Pope for his constant attention to Europe, always urging us to make it better by strengthening its vocation for peace. And I'll add not only Europe, but also the Middle East. I think of Pope Francis calling the Catholic pastor in Gaza every single day, calling him and speaking to him about the situation there, and constantly calling for peace with that situation and many others. France, the Eiffel Tower's lights will turn off in honor of Pope Francis. Donald Trump says, rest in peace, Pope Francis. He posted this on Truth Social. Vance, J.D. Vance, says, my heart goes out to the millions of Christians all over the world who loved him. And that's got to hit really hard for him since he literally just met him yesterday. Wow. European Union leader Pope Francis's legacy will bring about more compassionate world. Again, that was a huge emphasis of Pope Francis and his pastoral ministry. Compassion, mercy, love, forgiveness. EWTN CEO, Pope's passing is a moment of personal grief for Catholics. The German leaders mourn Pope's death. They say he's an advocate for the weak. With the death of Pope Francis, the Catholic Church in the world loses an advocate for the weak, a reconciling and warm-hearted person. His modesty, his spontaneity, and his humor, above all, his noticeably deep faith, have touched people all over the world and given them support, strength, and guidance. Indian Prime Minister has spoken of him, saying he's a beacon of compassion. King Charles, who just met with him, he was going to meet with him in the hospital. That was delayed, but then he was able to meet with them after being released from the hospital. Says he was deeply saddened by this. His Holiness will be remembered for his compassion, his concern for the unity of the church, and for his tireless commitment to the common causes of all people of faith and to those of goodwill who work for the benefit of others. And we're going to talk about this in upcoming streams, because Pope Francis leaves behind a church that is deeply divided. And so there is a discussion that needs to be had about the question of the unity of the church, the state of the church, what we need to see from the next pontificate, given how divided the church is. But that's something for an upcoming stream. His belief that care for creation is an existential expression of faith in God resounded with so many across the world. He says, "We send our most heartfelt condolences and profound sympathy to the church he served with such result." The New Zealand bishops have spoken of the importance of walking together and how Pope Francis has emphasized this accompaniment, journeying with, things like that. While he didn't set foot on our shores, we know the deep love that Pope Francis had for the Catholic faithful scattered across the world, they said. The Holy Father reminds us of the importance of walking together as the entire people of God, lay people, religious women and men, and clergy following the path of Jesus. So, and by the way, the canonization that I was telling y'all about that has been postponed because Pope Francis has passed away was the canonization of Carlo Acutis. It's to be delayed now because those are acts that a pope makes. And so during this period where there is no pope, this sede vacante period that the church is in, things like that cease until the next pope comes along. And let's briefly talk about that just before we move on to some additional information here. What we will likely see from the next pope, whether some Catholics like this or not, there will be some who will be very happy, others who will be very upset. What we'll likely see from the next pope is the next pope will effectively confirm the ministry and magisterium and service of Pope Francis. He'll confirm those things and he will build on top of them. He will continue that legacy in his own way, with his own style, with his own input, but he'll likely build on top of what Pope Francis has done. That tends to be what popes do in recent centuries. There have been exceptions in the past, going back even to the 9th century, where some popes would, annul the acts of their predecessor, and then the next pope would come along and annul the acts of his predecessor and restore the acts of the other one, and then the next one would come along and kind of do that. That was a very disastrous situation for the church. I think a lot of popes learned from that. So usually what they do is they don't come out and like reverse the acts of another pope. They'll tend to build on top of it, but they'll put their own input into it, their own style into it, their own perspective into it, but building on top of it. So that's what we're likely going to see with the next pope. He will build on Pope Francis's legacy and magisterium. But we're going to take a look in more detail about that in another stream, because we really need to have a discussion about that, because there's a lot of work that really needs to be done and a lot of things that we really need to see from the next pope. All right, so moving on to the next part here. Let's take a look at this from CNA. That talks a little bit about the legacy of Pope Francis. They say the Pope of the peripheries who shook up the church in very many ways, right? And some will say in great ways, others will say in horrible ways. There's a lot of people who feel that Pope Francis was great for the church. Others feel that no, he was horrible for the church. The church is worse than it was before. The church is better than it was. There's a church that's a situation that's very divided, and perspectives on him that are very divided. And so I think that the right to note shook up the church is correct. You know, Pope Francis's death today marks the end of a historic 12-year papacy. The first Latin American and the first member of the Society of Jesus, so he was a Jesuit, to be elected pope. His legacy will be shaped by his efforts to bring the gospel to the peripheries of the world and the margins of society while shaking up, sometimes vigorously and uncomfortably, what he saw as an unacceptably self-referential, unwelcoming, and rigid Catholic status quo. Whether or not that's true, whether or not that's an accurate evaluation is a different question. But we all know that from Pope Francis's perspective, he certainly saw it that way. And so he attempted to make it more welcoming. Whether he was successful at that or not, I suspect future generations will have the proper perspective to evaluate these things. You know, when I was in history classes for my undergrad, I took an American history course, and the professor said something along the lines of, "We're going to cover American history up until this time period and nothing beyond that." And there was a question like, "Okay, why nothing beyond that time period?" And the professor said something along the lines of, "Well, after that time period, it becomes too recent for us. It becomes within living memory of people alive today." And it is too hard to really evaluate those things properly and objectively from an historical perspective when it's within living memory like that. You need some more time. And so I think that's also true of evaluating Pope Francis's pontificate. Hey, we're going to do that in another stream, and I'm sure many others will as well. But it's important to keep in mind a proper, objective evaluation of Pope Francis and his pontificate is something that's going to take a long time to do. And I don't think that people who are alive and have their own personal experiences with what's going on are always the most objective. I think we're all subjective to a certain degree. And so I suspect, future generations will be a little bit better in determining what his legacy was and evaluating it and so on. But let's continue. After Benedict XVI's unexpected resignation in February 2013, y'all remember that? Imagine many of y'all who are watching recall that day. I recall, and I remember just being shocked. In fact, the people who were at that meeting when Pope Benedict was resigning, they did not know he was going to resign. They were all just in shock. And he was speaking in Latin, and so a lot of people probably didn't understand him, a lot of the bishops there. But they some of them said, I don't really know Latin well, but I knew enough to know he just resigned. So I mean, a lot of people were just like, wait, what did he just say? They were shocked. That was huge news. I still recall. And we saw the election of Pope Francis, and several years later, we started to see people saying, well, Benedict is still Pope. Francis wasn't properly elected. And there was a huge controversy from some people in the church on the status of Pope Francis. And I do have to say, as a side note, I do expect that to continue with the next Pope. I do believe that many will question the legitimacy of the next Pope in the same way that people did with Pope Francis. For better or worse, I think that's the situation that we find ourselves in. And for one reason or another that I've discussed many times on this channel, there will be a sizable portion of the church and some influential voices who will likely question and or even outright say that the next pope isn't the pope whenever that pope is elected, or shortly after their election they'll come out and say that. And so I do expect there's some rough days to come for the Catholic Church in dealing with that situation, but that's a little bit further down the road. There's a lot more that needs to be discussed before then. So yeah, Benedict XVI, unexpected resignation in February 2013. Cardinal Maria Bergoglio of Buenos Aires was given a mandate for reform on March the 13th, 2013 by the cardinals and the conclave convened. Huge controversy surrounding that. I've spoken about it here on this channel with the St. Gallen Mafia. Did they conspire to elect him? I do have some videos on that if y'all want to watch it. Ahead of the 2013 conclave, the 76-year-old Jesuit from Argentina was not initially considered a front runner. However, after he presented his vision for church reform in a speech to the cardinals leading up to the conclave, a majority of electors were persuaded that he would offer a strong response to the ongoing scandals and challenges roiling the church and provide solutions to collapsing church attendance and vocations. Again, whether or not he was successful in that is going to be a discussion we're going to have in coming weeks, right? We'll evaluate that. Taking the name of the 13th century Italian saint and founder of the Franciscan order, Francis of Assisi, who adopted a life of radical poverty after he served those in need and preached the gospel in the streets, the new pope aimed at a fostering of church reform, reaching out to the poor, marginalized and forgotten, and capable of dealing with the complexities of the faith and human relationships in the world today. And many are going to emphasize that, and that rightly needs to be emphasized. But a lot of other people in the church felt that they had become marginalized, that they had become alienated, and that they were not being reached out to. So there's kind of a mixed bag here. Some people felt that Pope Francis is a breath of fresh air, reaching out to the marginalized. Others felt that, well, he's not reaching out to me, and they felt alienated, and they themselves felt marginalized. This is what I mean by a church divided. I prefer a church which is bruised, hurting, and dirty because it has been out on the streets rather than a church which is unhealthy from being confined and from clinging to its own security, he said in Evangelii Gaudium in his apostolic exhortation from 2013, which was very strong on the message of evangelization and reaching people with the message of Jesus and with the message of mercy and with the gospel. Evangelii Gaudium was considered a manifesto for the new pontificate. Still, the true blueprint of his pontificate predated his election and was distinctly Latin American. Speaking in 2013 at World Youth Day in Rio de Janeiro, he urged his youthful audience to be unafraid of shaking things up in order to evangelize more effectively. Y'all remember that? A lot of people made a big deal out of that. What is it that I expect as a consequence of World Youth Day? I want to miss. I think the word was Hagan Leo. People would famously quote that, and a lot of people felt that Pope Francis ended up making a mess. Others felt that no, he did great, and some perceived it as, well, he made a mess in a good way, right? Shaking things up or reaching out to the marginalized. Others felt that no, he made a mess in a negative way. He left a lot of things in a very chaotic state, and so again, there's a divided view on Pope Francis there and his exhortation to make a mess. He says, I want to get rid of clericalism, the mundane, this closing ourselves off within ourselves in our parishes, schools, and structures because these need to get out. In pursuit of this messy evangelization, Francis offered a grand vision of decentralization. That's a huge aspect of Pope Francis's legacy. We've seen that with the Synod on Synodality, which is still a process that is going to continue and continue into 2028 with the next Pope, who will continue likely to implement the Synod on Synodality and this process of decentralization, but also listening and accompaniment. A church of pastoral and merciful engagement over rigid doctrinal precision and clericalism. The Pope frequently declared todos, 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 all, as an expression of how the church must be a welcoming place of mercy. I recall him doing that less than a year ago and emphasizing this notion that mercy is for everyone. Some people were happy to hear that. Others were really upset about that. Some people perceived that as a message of mercy and forgiveness for everyone. Others perceived this message of all as I'm okay, you're okay, and it doesn't matter what sin you're in. You don't have to repent. We're going to accept you as you are, and you don't need to change. Some people perceived it that way. And so Pope Francis was perceived in very different ways by different people. In December 2015, Pope Francis inaugurated an extraordinary Jubilee of Mercy, a special time for the church to help the whole church rediscover and make fruitful the mercy of God, with which all of us are called to give consolation to every man and woman of our time. Missionaries of Mercy were commissioned in 2016 to preach the gospel of mercy and to make that invitation concrete through the sacrament of confession. In addition to that, he also gave the Society of St. Pius X some faculties to remit sins in the confessional, and also to offer valid marriages with the cooperation of the local bishop. And that was part of that message of mercy. The centerpiece of his final years was the ongoing pursuit of synodality for the church. It was a 3-year process, and it actually is going to be, again, continuing into 2028. Yet from early on, his pontificate brought to the surface existing tensions within the church, beginning at the tumultuous 2014 and 2015 synods on marriage and the family, where cardinals debated the controversial proposal to lift the church's ban on reception of communion for the divorced and civilly remarried. Francis's post-synodal apostolic exhortation, Amor Laetitia, failed to dampen the controversy due to its unclear position on this contentious doctrinal issue. Amor Laetitia was a huge part of this pontificate. I think of some moments that were very controversial. It would certainly include Amor Laetitia, death penalty questions, the Pachamama situation that covered extensively on this channel, as I did Amor Laetitia and death penalty. Things like that were huge. And another one, and probably the most recent, and maybe the biggest of them all, was the Fiducia Supplicans controversy, which I covered extensively with over 70 videos on this channel. I want to say those were probably the biggest moments of this pontificate that were the most controversial. Some perceived these documents to be able to be read in an orthodox sense. Others understood them as incompatible with an orthodox understanding of Catholicism, and a complete breakaway with not only the disciplines of the church, but some felt even the dogmas of the church, that Pope Francis is doctrinally changing the immemorial values and doctrines of the church. And so very, very controversial moments, and we're going to examine those in much more detail in some upcoming streams here. I don't think today's the best day to do that, but we're going to talk about those, as well as the situation with Dignitas Infinita that they're talking about here. There were some questions about that document. It says the Holy Father, however, drew clear lines in the sand on key teachings with the dicastery for the doctrine of the faiths, Dignitas Infinita. Francis reaffirmed the church's perennial opposition to abortion. He was very strong against abortion. And he would say things like, abortion is like hiring a hitman to solve a problem. Abortion, euthanasia, gender ideology. He used a much publicized CBS 60 Minutes interview in May 2024 to state again categorically that women's ordination to the priesthood and diaconate was off the table. That was another huge part of his pontificate, where there's big debates on, is he going to try to open the door to women's ordination for the diaconate, or would he try to do it for the priesthood? And there would be people saying, well, he's going to open it up, and then others are saying, no, he's not going to. And so a lot of confusion, a lot of discussion on those things, a lot of different information, conflicting information. If there's one thing that really would summarize this pontificate, at least in the media, is conflicting information. A lot of conflicting information for this one. I suspect it will be just as bad, if not worse, for the next pontificate. He was a child of immigrants. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Leading with controversies while navigating the treacherous political landscape of the period. Father Bergoglio stirred enormous controversy as he undertook reforms of the local Jesuit province. So here they have a little bit of a bio on him as a priest, as a bishop of Buenos Aires. 8 years after reportedly finishing as the runner-up in the 2005 conclave. Did you know that Pope Francis was a runner-up for that conclave, that he may have been elected Pope instead of Benedict? There was a possibility he was going to be elected instead of Pope Benedict, 2005. They ended up going with Pope Benedict, however. Cardinal Bergoglio was picked by the College of Cardinals to succeed the German-born Pope. So they went ahead and went with him after Benedict. The newly elected pontiff, the first non-European pope since Gregory III in 741, immediately set the tone for his pontificate. You know that the duty of the conclave was to give a bishop to Rome, he declared. It seems that my brother cardinals went almost to the end of the world to get him, but here we are. Skipping ahead a little bit. The Holy Father's informal communication style, highlighted by interviews such as the ones he gave to the late Italian atheist journalist Eugenio Scalfari, and his off-the-cuff comments, especially his press conferences on the papal plane, made possible the rise of a parallel media-generated quasi-magisterium, in which secular and progressive Catholic media use his comments to claim that he was calling for major changes to the church's teachings. Yeah, I remember from just within a few weeks of him being elected, there was that huge scandal in the media with comments that Pope Francis made about, he's asked about the question of, homosexuals and the priesthood, and he said something along the lines of who am I to judge? And some people didn't always see the context behind that. I know I've covered it here on the show, but they weren't kind of aware of what he was saying. They took it to mean he has no problem with that. We saw later on, Pope Francis was very clear. He said, there's too much of this going on in the seminaries. We need to stop that. But yeah, I recall very early on a massive media scandal concerning those comments about Pope Francis. And that was just the beginning. It seems like every other day, every other week, there was some new scandal of something that Pope Francis said on, off the cuff, on an airplane. Some of the things were true. He did say them. Some of the things weren't true. It was taken out of context. It was kind of a mixed bag. But it seems like we were rocked by scandals every single week, by comments, and it didn't really let up, until maybe the last, few months of this pontificate. It seems like things had kind of died down and quieted down in the last maybe, half a year at this point at the most. But for the vast majority of the pontificate, we were constantly dealing with, what did Pope Francis say? What was the context? Did he really say that? What was the meaning? What did he intend to say? Has he come out and clarified himself? And yeah, this was a big deal, and we saw it beginning there. One legacy-defining example occurred during an in-flight press conference on the way home from World Youth Day. The Pope was asked to comment about a specific repentant Vatican official and the rumored existence of a gay lobby at the Vatican. That's what I was just telling you about. Francis offered a nuanced response to the query, distinguishing between a person simply being gay as opposed to participating in a lobby. If someone is gay and is searching for the Lord and has goodwill, then who am I to judge, he said. Instead of seeing it as a pastoral gesture toward homosexual persons, many news reports characterize the remark as softening of the church's moral prohibition on same-sex acts, with no meaningful clarification provided afterwards from the Vatican. And that was part of the problem is once you would have these situations, you wouldn't get sufficient clarification from the Vatican afterwards. That was part of the issue. Poor communication and lack of a follow-up correcting that with more effective communication. We saw that to a much lesser degree with Pope Benedict, much lesser degree. We remember that comment that he made about the use of condoms, and it sounded like Pope Benedict was in favor of them in certain cases, but he was offering a really, really qualified and nuanced answer, and he wasn't approving of the use of condoms, but we saw how the media kind of spun it. By the way, let me grab this. Thank you so much for that super chat, Matthew Schmidt. He says, 1 month ago, I did a reflection night for Pope Francis for my diocese in order to defend him and the magisterium. Thank you for all your work defending him. I learned so much on this channel. Thank you so much, Matthew. I really do appreciate that. I've taken a lot of heat for trying to take a balanced perspective here. I've had some criticisms of Pope Francis and his pontificate, but I've also tried to correct some misinformation. Some people have appreciated that, others have not. But I think it's the honest thing to do, is to be honest, fair, and balanced with the information. So I thank you for that. By the way, I do want to grab some of these other super chats before we continue. Let's see. Insert name here as a new member. Hey, welcome. Truth Brigade, good to see you. And she has just gifted 5 memberships. You are amazing, Truth Brigade. Thank you so much. And you've been a huge supporter of this channel for quite some time. And I thank you so much for giving these memberships to people. I really appreciate you. I don't know how to pronounce the name of your handle here. Alpemplar. I don't know what that is. That Templar? I don't know what script that is. A great man, rest well, Pope Francis, he says. Thank you so much for that. Master Yoda says, blessed response and memorial eternal to the ecumenical patriarch of Rome, Pope Francis, from the Byzantine Catholic outreach of Acadiana and Lafayette, Louisiana. Thank you so much for that. And by the way, I love the name. Catholic Christian, hey, good to see you. He says, love you, brother. Thank you so much. And I appreciate that super chat there. And thank you for your kind words most recently about me on some of your recent streams. Thank you for that. Truth Brigade, thank you for this super chat. Miracles followed contact with Pope Francis, except a cause for canonization to open. Miracles followed contact. I don't know if I'm understanding. Miracles followed contact with Pope Francis, except a cause. Are you saying that there have been some miracles following contact with Pope Francis? If so, I'd love to see some of those. That does bring up the question of, will we see Pope Francis canonized? Well, I do suspect, I don't know if it will be the next Pope, but I do suspect a future Pope will canonize Pope Francis. Some will love to hear that and will be very happy about that. Others will be very opposed to it. But I do suspect that some Pope, maybe the next Pope, if not a future Pope, will feel like the character of Pope Francis was such that this exemplifies saintly behavior. That wouldn't be an evaluation of his pontificate, because you can be a saint and not be a good pope, or you could be a good pope and not a saint, right? So those are kind of two different things. But I wanted to grab those super chats. Thank you all so much for that. All right, let's continue here. Oh, wow. I remember this. And I showed it during the opening credits here for the show. This might be the most iconic moment from Pope Francis. Let me actually get a better picture of that. The most iconic moment of Pope Francis for me was when I saw this image right here. Y'all remember that? How many of y'all remember that? You recall seeing this? An empty St. Peter's Square. Pope Francis emerges from St. Peter's Basilica with the Eucharist and elevated the Eucharist before the whole world in prayer for the world because of what was going on. You remember what was going on at that time? COVID. And at the time, there was a lot of concern about people, their safety, their health. Pope Francis was very concerned about that. So he didn't have people gathered in St. Peter's Square. Instead, he goes out completely alone, unattended. Like there's just nobody there, pretty much. Pouring down rain. They open the doors of St. Peter's Basilica and comes out, emerges Pope Francis with the Eucharist blessing the world. I thought, you know what? Whatever you think about Pope Francis, let's say that you don't have a good opinion about him, okay? Let's say you don't like him. Whether you love him or hate him, you gotta respect that moment. That was the most iconic, moving, and powerful moment that I saw from this pontificate. Regardless of what you want to say about the rest, positive or negative, this has to be the most iconic scene from Pope Francis. And I think it will be remembered for generations to come. And so that's what they're talking about here in the article. His March 2020 Urbi et Orbi address and blessing delivered amid the COVID-19 pandemic as he stood in an empty, rainy St. Peter's Square, as well as playing the role of peacemaker by working to restore U.S.-Cuban diplomatic ties and offering to mediate an end to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Help establish the Pope as a spiritual father figure, not only for the church, but also for the wider world. In 2024, he became the first pope to participate in the G7 meeting of world leaders, urging them to be aware of the threat and the promise of artificial intelligence, which he released a document specifically about that. By the way, thank you so much for this, Sean Matthew. Let me grab this. Sean Matthew just gifted 10 memberships to the viewers here. Thank you so much for that. And always good to see you. You've been around for a long time. Great supporter of this channel. Thank you so much for that. Nicole Marie, thank you as well. She just gifted 5 memberships. Y'all are amazing. Thank y'all. Thank y'all. Let's continue with this article a little bit. I'm skipping ahead because there's just a lot of information they cover. And you're welcome to go and read the whole thing over at CNA, but just kind of looking through some parts here. Internal reform. Francis's outward emphasis was matched by serious efforts to reform the inner structures of the Catholic Church to free it up for a greater focus on mission and service. Early on, he appointed a council of cardinals to advise him on curial and church reform. Its labors culminated in March 2022 with the promulgation of a new apostolic constitution of the Holy See that allowed dicasteries or Vatican departments to be headed by lay baptized Catholics and placed greater emphasis on evangelization. Francis tackled some aspects of Vatican finances, even as ongoing scandals overshadowed that progress. The Pope himself was drawn into one high-profile fraud case that led to the trial and 2023 conviction of his closest cardinal collaborators, Cardinal Becciu, on allegations of financial misconduct. Remember when Cardinal Becciu secretly recorded him? I know I covered that right here on this channel. We got to hear Pope Francis and what he said, kind of behind closed doors on the matter. And it didn't look bad on Pope Francis. It actually looked bad on the cardinal who was recording him secretly. Yeah, that was pretty wild. Francis also undertook a series of reforms related to the scourge of clergy sexual abuse, beginning in 2014 with the creation of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, headed by Cardinal Sean O'Malley of Boston, who was also a member of the Pope's Council of Cardinals. Francis convened a global Vatican summit on the issue in 2019, which gave rise to his new guidelines intended to strengthen provisions for bringing abusive priests to justice and holding bishops accountable for their handling of abuse allegations. Of course, there's been criticisms of Pope Francis and how he's handled that, especially with the case of Rupnik. It will now be up to the next Pope to oversee the trial on Father Rupnik, and we'll see how that pans out. Thank you so much for this. Will you be making a video about potential new popes? Yes, I will. I do already have a video that I made a year ago who will be the next pope. And I will update that now. But I think that most of the information that you see there is still relevant and applicable here. So you're welcome to go and watch it. But yeah, I will do a more up to date one to talk about that. I just felt like, yeah, today this is just too raw. I don't want to really kind of dive into that question today. Let's give it some time. Sean McKinney, how am I feeling? Well, I feel a little under the weather today, but if you mean how do I feel about this, I feel very sad, obviously, right? It was really sad to see him suffering. So in one sense, I'm glad that he's no longer suffering that physically because it looks like he was going through a horrible, horrible time. We saw some videos of him just a few weeks ago, like he couldn't even raise his hand to do the blessing. This is when he came out of the hospital, and I thought, my gosh, if he's struggling just to do that, I mean, this is not good. This is not good for him. So he was struggling a lot and suffering. I felt horrible for him. And also, Pope Francis suffered a lot from a lot of vicious criticism and vicious critics. And look, I'm the first to say there are legitimate criticisms that can be made about Pope Francis. Not to speak ill of him or anything, but look, you can criticize everybody legitimately. There's criticisms of me that you can make. Everybody has things that you could criticize legitimately. I think a lot of things that Pope Francis was criticized about were not fair. We're not fair to him. We could talk about the real ones, the real things that we could criticize about him, but it's like you can't even get to that discussion when you're having to swat away like whack-a-mole so many false accusations and misinformation. It's like you're so busy dealing with that you can't get to the real issues of what we do need to criticize. And so I feel bad that he went through all of that. And so it's a sad day. And I also think, man, the day after Easter, well, I guess it's wonderful that he was able to make it through Holy Week and even make it to Easter Sunday. But I just kind of think, man, that hits hard hearing that he passes the day after Easter. Gosh, really? Man. So yeah, and I suspect a lot of people are just broken right now, and I totally get it. I totally get it. Again, pray for the repose of his soul. Um, okay. So they talk a little bit about synodality and his role and involvement with synodality. A big controversial moment was Traditionis Custodes. They talk about that here. Francis similarly created ripples with his treatment of Catholic communities attached to the traditional Latin Mass. And Traditionis Custodes' 2021 decree restricting its celebration shocked adherents to the rite and prompted even some of the Pope's liberal allies to characterize the document's stern language and severe suppression as a stunning departure from the Pope's call for a synodal listening approach. A lot of people felt that they become marginalized, that they weren't being listened to, that they weren't being accompanied by Pope Francis. They felt like, okay, well, you're accompanying these other people, but you're not doing that with us. So a lot of people felt really hurt by Traditionis Custodes, and I criticized the document at the time. I did put it in its proper perspective, and I showed some unfair criticisms of it, and I showed people where they were unfairly criticizing it, but I also showed some legitimate criticism of Traditionis Custodes, and I stand by them to this day. There were some things about it that I get where Pope Francis was coming from, but I don't know if this was the best way to handle it, and I certainly don't think this is what needs to be handled when you got pride masses and other things going on. And I even said that 3 or 4 days ago on a stream. I had a whole stream all about that, about the Latin Mass being suppressed and parish level in Detroit, and I just really had to emphasize. Look, I get some of the reasons why some people felt this was necessary in various parts of the world, but how can we even talk about that in the context when you have pride masses going on and nobody's doing anything about that? It's just like this isn't the way to do it. So I've criticized Pope Francis on that respectfully, charitably, constructive criticism, which the magisterium allows for, and Pope Francis personally asked for. Pope Francis personally asked for that. The magisterium and Donum Veritatis allows for it. So I offered some, and perhaps we'll talk about some of those things in an upcoming stream when we talk about the good and the bad from this pontificate. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly from this pontificate, but today's not the day to dive deep into that. Let me grab this. Thank you so much, Christine Live, for the soup chat. I would encourage everyone to watch the video where the Pope speaks to a young boy who lost his atheist father. I remember that. It was seen over 10 million times. The comments show atheists who say if there is a God, they saw it in him. That was Pope Francis. There was a lot of people who responded well to that and appreciated it. A lot of other people felt like, no, this is a terrible thing to say. And it almost encourages atheism. I think what Pope Francis was kind of doing there was exactly what the Second Vatican Council does whenever it talks about the possibility of salvation, even for people who have not yet arrived at a conscious knowledge and awareness of God. I think that's what Pope Francis was doing there. Whether you agree with that or not, whether you think that's a good thing or not, I think that's kind of what was going on. But a lot of people perceived it differently, right? There were some people who were encouraged by that. Other people thought you're compromising church doctrine. So, like I've said, since day one, he's been a very controversial figure. You either love him or hate him. There's a very polarizing Pope, to say the least. Okay. Immense controversy likewise surrounded the document issued by Fernandez at the end of 2023, Fiducia Supplicans, that I covered extensively on this channel, and I have criticisms of and have from day one. But I also pointed out to people a lot of the criticisms that are out there are not fair and they're based on misinformation. So we need to properly read it. And once we do that, then we can actually criticize it legitimately. That allowed non-liturgical blessings for same-sex couples and couples in irregular situations. The decree sparked strong disagreement among the world bishops, with almost all of African bishops refusing to implement the decree. That's misinformation that I corrected right here on this channel. There is so much misinformation still to this day on this. That's not true. Saying in a formal statement in January 2024 that it has sown misconceptions and unrest in the minds of many lay faithful, consecrated persons, and even pastors. I've covered this extensively, so I'm not going to address this in any more detail now. Go watch any of the 70 videos I did on this at this point. Francis, however, was also consistently clear of key areas of church teaching through Dignitas Infinita that we covered in depth. We saw that. Undeterred by the critics, the Holy Father pushed ahead for his vision for a synodal church in 2021. Francis made the unprecedented decision to forego writing a post-synodal apostolic exhortation at the end of the synod and just made the exhortation itself magisterial, which is an option we knew he had in canon law, but no pope in the post-conciliar church had ever exercised that option until him. Okay, so skipping ahead a bit here. That pretty much wraps that one up. Let's take a look at what some news outlets are saying. While I take a quick break, I'm going to also put on the screen here some live coverage of this event. Let's take a look at that and see what's going on in the news, and I will be right back. Let me make sure that you can hear and see the news here. Let me know if that is coming up for you. Hold on. For some reason, I cannot hear that. That's odd. I can't hear it. So if I can't hear it, I know you can't hear it. Let me see what's going on here. That is really weird. Everything's playing, but hold on. Hang tight. Trying to find out what's going on with my audio here. Okay.
because he didn't want to be somewhat isolated in the apostolic palace, which the popes traditionally use. He wanted to be situated around people, and of course that's very much where the hustle and bustle of Vatican activity is. A lot of the clerics who live and work in the Vatican are there, so he can be very much in the mix. The document that you mentioned there, Fratelli Tutti, that's been cited by a great number of groups, a great number of political bodies who've been working to try and promote, especially interreligious activities. The Pope himself has cited it on a number of occasions in meetings, dialoguing with other religious leaders, particularly those of the Islamic world. That document itself has been a source of controversy because the Catholics have been concerned that it proposes a move away from the hierarchical or the vertical structure within the Catholic Church where you look towards God, and it proposes more of a lateral looking amongst fellow men, but removing the spiritual aspect to it. And this, I think, has been the element behind a number of the Pope's documents, whilst appearing initially very, very appealing to many. For those within the Church, there's often been a particular element that's proposed by the Pope that's left them with a great source of concern for the Church's perennial teaching.
All right, Michael Haynes, out of Rome right now. Thank you so much for your reporting. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we've been sharing here live now from Fox a number of live events. I'm sharing one with you right now. This is a mass happening in Gaza. And as you can see on the left-hand corner of your screen there, we are keeping an eye on several other live events, masses, services that will be happening a little bit later today as well. We have plenty more reaction on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break. If you are just joining us on live now from Fox, my name is Christy Matino. Thank you for joining us for our coverage of the passing of Pope Francis. We'll be right back.
Back here, so let's see what all is going on. I haven't really been able to check anything else. Let me maybe see what people are saying on social media. I just woke up to this a few hours ago. I wasn't able to get a whole lot of rest a few nights ago, and so I've been catching up on that. And so I woke up a little bit later than normal today, and so I was a little bit slower to the information. But as soon as I woke up, I just saw numerous messages from people telling me, what's going on and about the sad news. So various things, and I saw somebody message me and told me that there's a lot of the critics who are out today, saying a lot of really bad things about Pope Francis. And my thing is, look, are there things to criticize about this pontificate? Yeah. Can it be done? Yeah. Are we going to do it on the channel? Yeah. But the day he passes away, is it really the time to do that? Really? Is that really like the first thing that you should think of? Shouldn't you think of, well, he's now gone before the judgment seat and stands before God, and shouldn't you pray for that person? Shouldn't that be the number one thing? I see one person says, now he knows he was teaching a false religion. Again, even if you believe that about Pope Francis, is that really the first thing you want to do? Oh wow, Pope Francis riding through the Pope Mobile for the last time yesterday. Oh, horrible comments on this. Somebody says goodbye and good riddance. My thing is, you don't have to like Pope Francis, but would you really want people remembering you that way by saying good riddance when you die? Is that really what you want? If you stand before God and people are on earth saying good riddance to you. Really? That's horrible and shameful comments. Again, you can say that I don't like Pope Francis's pontificate. I don't evaluate it as a good pontificate. Hey, fine. If you want to take that perspective, but show some respect. Like, that's just disgusting. Well, anyways, let me show you the video of him. This is evidently the last video of him riding the Pope Mobile. That's sad. This was during an audience. Let's see here. Wow. He's that ill and he was still able to do that? Wow. Poor thing. He still went out there to greet people. Wow. The day before he passes away, he's out there still greeting, audiences. Uh, I actually have a couple pictures where I was there for an audience with Pope Francis, and it was last year at this time during Holy Week. Last year, I got to see Pope Francis, and here is my only photo with Pope Francis. It wasn't actually with Pope Francis because he's just riding by and I'm in the photo. So, but I can at least say, in a qualified sense, I have a photo with Pope Francis. So here he is in the Pope Mobile. He's smiling. He was in a lot of better, health condition at that time. Because again, this was last year during Holy Week. This would have been on hmm, hmm. I don't know if it was Good Friday. I'd have to go back and look. But yeah, he's looking at the camera. He's looking at us here. There I am being blocked off by this Swiss guard. I'm at the very front at the barriers. You can see the barriers literally right here, so you can't move anymore. Um, and so there's that. And I got another one here. Pope Francis. We got a couple audiences rode by and check this one out. Looked right in my camera and smiled. Bam! That was pretty cool. My wife has another one where on a different time, he was looking right at her and smiled and all that. So I guess Pope Francis saw me for half a second, right? Acknowledged my existence for half a second. So, that's when he rides through after the general audience. You can see all these newlyweds over here at the front. I got to interview one of them. After the audience, after he meets everybody, then he kind of drives through and greets everyone in attendance. And I have to say, that place was packed all the way to the end of St. Peter's Square. I have never seen something like that many people. It was packed. It was full. It was absolutely amazing to see. They showed me on the Jumbotron, by the way. Y'all remember that? A lot of people were messaging me. I just saw you on EWTN. I just saw you on Vatican News and all that, because they put me up on the Jumbotron. I think that was during that audience, if I'm not mistaken. I can find a photo of it, but yeah. Anyways, there's some good memories here, and I remember Pope Francis going through the Pope Mobile then, and it's incredible to think, wow. So he was doing that literally yesterday. As sick as he was, you would think he'd be in bed or something, but I guess he's a man of the people, and wanted to greet everyone. There's a lot of people there to see him, and didn't want to disappoint him. So that's pretty incredible to see. Let's continue here, though. Let me see what else is going on in social media. Maybe some people have some good photos. Okay, so I see the JD Vance meeting. I did show that yesterday. Well, let's skip ahead a little bit. I'm still looking here. A lot of people talking about the JD Vance thing. I'm looking. I haven't had a chance to really look through social media like this, so it's It's all brand new, so, and we're doing this live. So taking the information as it comes. Wow, a lot of people are posting the JD Vance video. Here is Cardinal Dolan offering some comments about Pope Francis. So let's see what he has to say. I have not seen this yet. It's coming on my timeline. So let's take a look.
He was such an eloquent preacher of divine mercy, but we also offer gratitude to God for the gift, the gift that he was. We don't call him Holy Father for nothing. He's the father of our family, and there's a death in the family, and we're saddened. We use a Latin phrase these days, starting about 5 hours ago, sede vacante. The chair is empty. The empty chair, the chair of Peter, is empty, sede vacante. All right? That's the chair he sat in when he visited New York. That's his portrait, obviously. That's the cross he carried. The chalice that he gave me, remember, at Madison Square Garden? That's the chalice he gave me. So we have vivid, grateful memories of him. And I'm just so happy that you all are here. We can never choreograph our own birth or death, can we? That's always in God's hands. But if you could choreograph it, you couldn't choreograph it any better than what happened. The last time we saw him, Easter Sunday, the last words, a blessed Easter, as he gave us his blessing. You couldn't, the day that we believe Jesus rose from the dead and shares that victory with us, in which we trust by divine mercy, Pope Francis now shares in abundance. You couldn't have choreographed it better. And we thank him for that. The way he lived and the way he died, he was a great teacher, which the Pope is always called to be.
That actually reminds me, he's talking about a chalice given to him. I don't have anything given to me by Pope Francis, but I do recall when I went into that audience, got a whole bunch of rosaries, blessed by Pope Francis there in that audience where he blesses items, a whole bunch of rosaries blessed by Pope Francis. And I was also able to take them to Israel and have them touched to the Holy Sepulchre. And I remember I gave some of those out to patrons at the time, but I still have maybe about a dozen or so of those left over. And so maybe I'll send those out to some more patrons. But wow. Let's see what else we got here. Looking through the timeline, seeing if other people have comments and videos about Pope Francis, and seeing what all footage we got. Bear with me as I'm looking through everything. Oh, wow. Okay. Here's Pope Francis with his daily call to the priest in Gaza, talking to him about the situation there. Let me make sure that you can hear the audio, but yeah, we knew that he spoke to him daily and even resumed those calls after his hospital visit with the priest there. And so take a look.
Salam alaikum.
I think this was a very recent video. You know, these are the moments that I think people need to be focusing on today. We got time to discuss the pontificate later, evaluating it later. These are the ones we need to focus on today. These great moments where we see just beautiful acts from Pope Francis. Those are the things that people need to be focused on. And I'm already sad to just kind of scroll through Twitter and see people just trashing him and whatever criticisms you have of them. Let's first of all make sure that they're constructive and not destructive in nature, and let's also hold off on that a little bit, right? Let's remember the good times and the good things. It's like, look, I got family members who passed away who, there's some issues there, right? But when they pass away, it's like that's not the first thing you want to talk about or think about. You want to try to remember the good things about that. And yeah, we can kind of get to that other stuff later, but let's remember the good moments from that person before we get into anything else. This is a real human being here. This is a real person. And, he had feelings like everyone else. And I recall when we went to that papal audience and got to see him in person. I remember my wife saying a lot, like, it looks like he's suffered a lot. And yeah, you could kind of see it on his face. He's still smiling, he's still joyful, but you could tell he was suffering a lot. And it was, there was a lot of people saying horrible things about him. And you could tell it takes it takes its toll on you after a while. He's a human being like everybody else. He has feelings like everyone else. And so let's keep that in mind. You don't want your first move when somebody passes away to be bashing them and speaking negatively of them. That's not the right way to behave. You wouldn't want people doing that to you. Just don't do that to others.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Ok, muchas gracias, Santo Padre. Muchas gracias, Santo Padre. Grazie tante. Vuoi ringraziare, pregare per lei, chiedere sempre prega per loro. E prega a favore, non contro. Sì, grazie, Santo Padre. A domani. Grazie. A domani, Santo Padre. A domani. Shukran. Shukran.
Speaking Arabic there, he said shukran, which means thank you. And I heard a assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. So my wife just brought this by and showed this. We got it from the papal audience and got it blessed. This is one of the items she got. And like I said, a whole bunch of rosaries. I got them right next to me to the left. Blessed by Pope Francis that day. So a lot of good memories, a lot of good times there in that trip last year. It was an amazing trip, and it was really cool to get to see him. By the way, let me grab this super chat because I don't want them getting lost. Let me see here. By the way, Yvonne, welcome to the channel, new member. And NT, thank you. He says, I was confirmed this Easter vigil just 2 days before his passing. May he rest in peace. So he was your pope for just a little bit, right? That's yeah, that's pretty cool. And by the way, congratulations on that. But yeah, you could say he was your pope. You can say that. Okay, so let me look around and see what else we have being posted on social media. Sometimes people include some really good stuff, good foot. Here it is. This is the footage I wanted y'all to see. The most iconic footage of Pope Francis that I was just telling y'all about earlier during COVID. This was it. Whatever criticisms you have from him or of him, you gotta respect this moment from Pope Francis. COVID blesses the world. This was such a moving and powerful moment. Watch this. Please let me know if y'all cannot hear this in the chat because I want y'all to hear the audio. Wow. Wow. I'm gonna play that several times for y'all during this stream because that to me was the most powerful thing I've ever seen from this pontificate, or maybe any pontificate, right? I mean, there's only so much video footage we have of popes, but gosh, I remember it especially at the time because there's just so much confusion at the time. You don't know what to believe about what people are saying about COVID. You're locked down. You can't really go out, and to see that, it was powerful. It really was. There was just something about that. They were just, man. By the way, thank you for this super chat from Christine. Let's see what she says. If power flows from the top down, and it does, we can all probably say that we advance in holiness under his Pope. My accountant husband now teaches 3 catechism classes. My son is discerning the priesthood, and we all go to adoration frequently. Thank you, Pope Francis. That is so cool. And thank you so much for that super chat. Wow. Aaron says he has not seen that footage before. Oh, I'm telling you, that was the most iconic moment of this papacy. I'm going to go over that several more times, but let's see what else people are posting. Because like I say, I haven't had a chance to really look through social media yet. And sometimes people are posting some really good stuff here. So let's take a look. Wow. Yeah. Okay, we can't watch the whole thing because it's 17 minutes long, but man, this was a huge part of his pontificate. And I guess there's so many of them, it slipped my mind. Here is him consecrating Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, a big thing Fatima, um, from the Fatima vision. Here's St. Peter's Square. You can see Bernini's columns here. Down here leads to the tomb of St. Peter. I got some video footage of me going down there that I posted on this channel. Wow. Okay, so let's take a quick look at this. It's 17 minutes long, so we can't watch the whole thing, but let's watch just a few minutes.
Ricorriamo a te. Tu sei madre, ci ami e ci conosci. Niente ti è nascosto di quanto abbiamo a cuore. Madre di misericordia, tante volte abbiamo sperimentato la tua provvidente tenerezza, la tua presenza che riporta la pace, perché tu sempre ci guidi a Gesù, che è il principe della pace. Ma noi abbiamo smarrito la via della pace. Abbiamo dimenticato la lezione delle tragedie del secolo scorso, il sacrificio di milioni di caduti nelle guerre mondiali. Abbiamo disatteso gli impegni presi come comunità delle nazioni e stiamo tradendo i sogni di pace dei popoli e le speranze dei giovani. Ci siamo ammalati di avidità, ci siamo rinchiusi in interessi nazionalisti, ci siamo lasciati inaridire dall'indifferenza e paralizzare dall'egoismo. Abbiamo preferito ignorare Dio, convivere con il tuo interesse all'eredità.
Y'all remember that? Man, I know we covered that live right here on this channel. We covered that live and in depth and spoke a lot about it. And does this fulfill what the what was being requested in the vision? And what about previous consecrations? Were they valid? We discussed all of that. And man, I forgot all about them. All right, so looking through, seeing what else we got here on social media. A lot of people posting the JD Vance stuff. Was that his last audience with someone? JD Vance? I'm looking through Be patient with me. All this is, as you can imagine, brand new. Okay, is this his last public appearance? Somebody says this is this is EWTN saying his last public appearance. Here it is. Last public appearance, his final gesture of love for the church was the Orbi et Orbi blessing, which is where he did that COVID blessing too. With which Catholics celebrate the resurrection on Easter. Let us listen to his words and pray for the eternal repose of our shepherd. Okay, let's see what he says. Oh, man. Oh, this is hard to watch.
Cari fratelli
Dear
e
brothers and
sorelle,
sisters, happy Easter.
buona Pasqua. Benedicat vos omnipotens
May God
Deus,
bless you,
Pater et Filius
Father, Son, and Holy
et
Spirit.
Spiritus Sancti.
I was there for this last year and got to see him come from the balcony. Man. You've been to St. Peter's Basilica. You know where he's at. You've walked right there. Oh, I need to see this again. This was his last public appearance.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, buona Pasqua. Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sancti.
Oh, man. Wow. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I guess like if you gotta go, this would be the best time right after Easter and right after blessing everyone, right? I mean, I guess you got to go sometime, and that would be you're going out on a good note, you know. Wow, man. Let me see what else people are posting. Like I said, there's some good stuff like this. I'm gonna ignore the negative, nasty comments, but I want to see what all good things people are posting. I remember this moment. This isn't a video, but I do remember this picture from the video. That's when he came out on the balcony for the first time. In fact, I'm sure I can find that video real quick. Let me see. I'm sure people are posting that. It's got to be there. Well, I thought I could find it quickly. Evidently not. You would think that people would be posting his first appearance on the Logia. I see pictures of it, but I'm looking for the video footage. Oh, wow. Look at this one. Pope Francis celebrating Mass ad Orientem in the Holy House of Loreto. Francis celebrating Mass ad Orientem. He did that several times. Check this one out.
O Dio, questa offerta con la potenza della tua benedizione e degnati di accettarla a nostro favore in sacrificio spirituale perfetto, perché diventi per noi il corpo e il sangue del tuo amatissimo Figlio, il Signore nostro Gesù Cristo. La vigilia della sua passione, egli prese il pane nelle sue mani sante e venerabili. E alzando gli occhi al cielo, a te, Dio Padre suo onnipotente, rese grazie con la preghiera di benedizione. Spezzò il pane, lo diede ai suoi discepoli e disse: Prendete e mangiatene tutti. Questo è il mio corpo offerto in sacrificio per voi. Dopo la cena, allo stesso modo, prese questo glorioso calice nelle sue mani sante e venerabili. Gli rese grazie con la preghiera di benedizione. Lo diede ai suoi discepoli e disse: prendete e bevetene tutti. Questo è il calice del mio sangue per la nuova ed eterna alleanza, versato per voi e per tutti in remissione dei peccati. Fate questo in memoria di me.
Wow, I am glad somebody posted that, man. I'm keeping these open so I can maybe repost them later on this channel as separate videos so people can access them quickly. Um, man. Okay. All right. Here's what the here's what the commenter, I think it was Christine, was talking about earlier. Pope Francis's words to a boy whose father passed away. Little boy asked the Pope if his dad was in heaven, and he had the sweetest response. Let's see what he says. When it was his turn to ask a question, Emmanuel got nervous. He says, "Speak." Even though the Pope encouraged him, he was still scared. "Come to me, Emmanuel," he says. "Come to me and whisper to my ear. Whisper in my ear." Emmanuel burst into tears. The Pope held him. Then they spoke in private for some time. Emmanuel returned to his seat. Pope addressed the crowd. He said, "He told me a short time ago his father died. He was an atheist, but he had all 4 of his children baptized. He was a good man. Has the doubt that his dad was not a believer, and that he couldn't go to heaven. It is God who decides who goes to heaven, but how is God's heart in front of a father like that? What do you think? A dad's heart. God has a dad's heart, and in front of a dad who, even if not a believer, has been able to baptize his children, and pass on his goodness. Do you think that God could leave him far from him? Do you think this? Say it loudly with courage. And the crowd says, "No." Does God abandon his children? No. Does God abandon his children if they are good? No. Here, Emmanuel, this is the answer. Surely God was proud of your father, because it is easier to baptize children when you believe in God than when, and God loved this for sure. Speak to your dad. Let me see that part. because it's easier to baptize children when you believe in God than when you don't believe in God, and God loves this for sure. Speak to your dad, pray for your dad. Thank you, Emmanuel, for your courage. Okay, so I remember that. Yeah, and there were so many people who took it different ways. So many people were very negative about that. Others were really happy, and I think what he's doing is he's reemphasizing what Vatican II and Lumen Gentium, I think it's paragraph 16, talks about how even those who have not yet arrived at a explicit awareness of God, i.e., agnostics, um, even the plan of salvation is available for them, and so um, I think that's kind of what he's doing there. Um, but yeah, a lot of people were really upset with that. Others were really happy, and so that was a huge, very controversial moment in his pontificate. Let's see what else we got. I can't show this because I'll get a copyright strike, but it's a video of Pope Francis saying no to female priests. Um, I think that was a 60 Minutes interview. Hold on. Yeah, I think that was the 60 Minutes interview. They'll give you a copyright strike. Let me see what else people are posting. Here's Pope Francis opening the doors at St. Peter's that are only opened very, very rarely during Jubilee time. And so here it is. Rarely are these doors opened. Last time I went, they were closed. That was last year. There's a Pieta. As soon as you come in to St. Peter's Basilica, it's on the right. Wow. That's a good one. Let me see what else people have. People are posting some good stuff. Good moments. Here's somebody posting some stuff about his legacy. Let's take a look at this. So you can see him as a young boy here, now newly ordained priest, here as the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, and then as Pope. Pope Francis is over here in this photo, born in 1936 in Buenos Aires. Before his priesthood, Bergoglio worked as a chemical technician. I don't think this is authentic, by the way. I've seen this photo without Black Sabbath on it. I think somebody added that because the photo that I've seen in him in clericals is always blank, and it makes no sense to have clericals with Black Sabbath on it. I think that's a doctored photo. Let's see what we have here as Archbishop of Buenos Aires, known for his close connection with the poor. 2013 became first Latin American and Jesuit Pope. This looks like recent footage because he put on a lot of weight in the last year or so. Wow, I remember that photo. That's kind of an iconic one. I've used that for a lot of thumbnails. That's a good photo. Let's see what we have here. I think here he was praying at the Blue Mosque. I know Benedict also prayed at that same Blue Mosque with the same Mufti. And there's JD Vance and Pope Francis. I posted that yesterday. That was from yesterday. Wow. Wow. Let's see what else people have. Oh, they got another angle here of Pope Francis in his final blessing, um, directly from the Logia. This is where he came out and first announced his papacy, right? But here is his last appearance, which it's interesting. His last appearance is the same place as where his first appearance was. I just now realized that. Very frail Pope Francis here. Attempting to bless the people. Wow. See if I can find some footage of him first making his public appearance. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I'm looking, y'all. Bear with me. I really do want to show this if possible. First time that we saw Pope Francis come out. Let me look on YouTube because evidently Twitter is a no-go. I don't understand why people aren't posting this first. Here we go.
Head of the world's Catholic Pope, but who?
Sancti Romani Ecclesiae Cardinalem Bergoglio.
Jorge Mario Bergoglio of Argentina waited in the wings, Vatican TV capturing the moments before he greeted the world under his new name. Pope Francis, the first of that name, a Latin American where 40% of the world's Catholics now live.
I remember that day. I watched that appearance live. I remember sitting on my couch watching this. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, he seems like a really humble and holy man. That was the first impression I got. You know, I remember other people posting, they got a very different impression. They felt like, oh, this is an evil and horrible man. I remember my first gut reaction was, this is a good, holy, and humble man. And looking back on his pontificate, after seeing the way things went down, studying it and following it and covering it extensively, I have my criticisms of Pope Francis, but at the end of the day, I still think that my initial reaction was right. I think he meant well. He intended well. I think he was a good man. Did he always handle situations in the most effective way? No. There have been popes who were very holy people, but they weren't also the best popes. Um, one doesn't necessarily follow, right, to the other. You could be really a holy man, but ineffective in your leadership elsewhere. Um, so regardless of how we evaluate his pontificate, I do stand by my initial gut reaction of this is a good and holy man and well intentioned. Regardless of the criticisms that we can make of how effective he was here, was this a good decision? Was this good or bad, or could he have done better here? You know, I think that you can always look at a person, and I can even say about myself. I mean, could I have handled this better? Could I have done that better? Yeah, of course, of course. So we got to be able to look at people and say, their actions, what they do, how they handle things. Could they be better? Yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad or evil person. It could be that they're a good person, but they're operating based on misinformation or poor information, a little bit of information, or they're considering something else that I haven't considered. There's a lot of things that go on there. So I stand by my initial reaction of Pope Francis there when he first came out on the Logia. Looking through here, what else we got on social media? People are asking what's next. Well, we will have some days of mourning, and then they will gather together the College of Cardinals who are of voting age. They will bring them together, and they will then start the process of electing another pope. Here's the bells at St. Peter's going on, announcing the death of Pope Francis. Somebody's asking, does anyone know if he received last rites? Great question. Let me see if I can do a quick search. I suspect he did. I don't know the circumstances of like the last moments. I don't know if anybody has posted details of that yet. I don't know if we know yet. I don't see an answer readily available. I don't know if we have that information yet. If we do, please alert me in the chat. Do we know any details of his last moments? I would like to know as well. Pope Francis has died. What happens next? The death of Pope Francis begins the so-called sedevacante, a period when the see of Peter lies vacant. The time of the sedevacante after the Pope's death brings with it a series of symbols, traditions, and protocols that have existed for centuries and express the papacy's essence. The bells of St. Peter's toll in morning, and Vatican flags fly at half-mast. Please send me details if you find out what we know about his last moments. I haven't seen anything, but I also haven't been able to do any deep digging right now because as soon as I find out, I started preparing to go live to let y'all know what we know so far and what I've been able to kind of see leading up to this stream. I only had about 30 minutes to kind of look through. But I wanted to immediately touch base with y'all about this. And of course, I'll be doing future streams um, on what we know, and of course, funerals, and I'll be covering the next election and all of that, and the appearance of the next pope. I'm going to cover all that, and also videos evaluating his pontificate and talking about highlights and controversial moments, and yeah, we're going to cover all that. But trying to see what we do know so far. Again, in the chat, if you know about the last moments of his life, if we have any details, did he receive last rites, stuff like that, please put it in the chat. I would like to present what we know so far. He may have done last rites a while ago. Well, I think you could do it multiple times, right? I'm pretty sure you could do it multiple times. So, still looking through. Bear with me. Like I said, all this is live. Trying to see what Vatican News has posted. Not a lot of information available yet. Wow. Even from like EWTN. The Vatican has declared 9 days of mourning for Pope Francis. And then after those 9 days, that's when you'll start to get the next step in the process, which is the election of another pope. Hang tight, y'all. I'm searching. Well, I don't see anything at the moment. I do invite y'all to post some of your comments and questions. Go ahead and put them in the live chat. Make sure to tag me to @Reason and Theology, and I'm going to take a look at those and answer your questions, and also, examine some of your comments. Go ahead and post them now. I'm going to take a quick break here, and while we do that, I will see what's going on with Fox. Maybe play them, or wonder if Vatican News is covering anything right now live. Let's see. They are covering something live, but they're just basically showing St. Peter's Square live. I'll pull that up here and play this for just a moment. Again, put your questions and comments to me at Reason and Theology in the comment section, and I will be right back to take those. I do want to mention Pope Francis has appointed 83 of the 187 cardinals who are of voting age who will elect the next pope. So the majority are appointed by Pope Francis. Not entirely sure how accurate this graph here is, but I have seen this before from the 2025 or for the 2025 papal conclave, an ideological makeup, allegedly. You're going to have almost half that are conservative, about a quarter or a third that look moderately conservative, about a third that are moderately liberal, and then a small portion that are liberal. I don't know how accurate this is. I suspect we're going to see this a lot, but I don't know. I don't know. I'd be curious upon what information they based that graph on. I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but I share it with you for whatever it is worth. Okay. So do popes have a specific place where they are buried? Yeah, there are multiple places. But I think Pope Francis just changed where he is going to be buried. And we covered that earlier at the beginning of the stream. Let's see. Any thoughts on who will be the next pope? I did do a video about a year ago on who will be the next pope. I will do it again with more updated. But yeah, Parolin, Erdo, and Pizzaballa, I think, are actually big contenders. And Pizzaballa is kind of just recently created a cardinal. But he is definitely a man of the people. This is the patriarch, Latin patriarch of Jerusalem. Got to briefly participate in a mass of his last year in Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. And he loved by so many people, and obviously dealing with a very volatile situation there with the issues going on in the Middle East. I could see him being a serious contender. I think a lot of people would be happy with him. Both your trads, your non-trads. Like, I think a lot of people would be happy with him. And so we'll see. St. Mary Major. Yes, I think that's where Pope Francis has chosen to be buried from what we saw earlier. Yeah, double check me on that. We took a look at it. Yeah. What else we got? Okay. I think I grabbed everything there. I'm going to do some more streams here as soon as we find out more information. I wanted to do one touch base with y'all as soon as I found out the news broke, but I'm going to take some time to kind of look into what else is available out there and touch base with y'all again in another stream, most likely today. And then, in the coming days or so, we'll have some streams evaluating this pontificate, and also other streams talking about who will be the next pope, kind of considering that question, as well as just keeping y'all up to date on highlights that are going on in this very important moment in the Catholic Church. And so stay tuned for more. Please hit the like button and the subscribe button so that you can stay tuned for future streams. Please hit the bell for notification. A lot of people are not aware of when I go live, so you need to make sure to hit that bell for notification. So if you want to be up to date with what's going on, you need to hit the sub button, hit the like button, and hit that bell for notification, because I don't always go live at the same time. So please go ahead and do so. Christian says, thank you for your work, Michael. Thank you. I appreciate it. Cardinal Fernandez, think he'll keep his role after Francis's passing. I suspect that the next pope will choose his own head for the dicastery, for the doctrine of the faith. Popes tend to do that, right? So I suspect he'll get his own guy in there. I don't think that Francis will be relieved of. Fernandez will be relieved of his position immediately, but I do suspect he'll kind of be phased out, and they'll bring on board, whoever the next pope thinks is best for that job. So we'll see. All right, y'all. Thank y'all so much, and pray for the repose of the soul of Pope Francis. Hit the subscribe button so you can stay tuned to what's going on. Also, I really would appreciate y'all's support for the channel. This is how I provide for my family full time. So I really am dependent on people's generosity and enabling me to be able to continue to do material like this. So if you want to support the channel so that I can continue to offer this material to everyone free of charge, please consider supporting me at Patreon. Or become a channel member right here. Hit the join button right next to the subscribe button right here on YouTube, or patreon.com/Reason to Theology. That's a great way to support the channel so I can continue to do this. And thank y'all to all of y'all who have been supporting. Jimmy, Leslie Hansen there. Thank y'all so much for supporting the channel. All of you who sent super chats, those of y'all who did live memberships for everyone. I appreciate all of you supporters. Thank you so much. All right, see y'all soon for another stream later on today. Pray for the repose of Pope Francis's soul. God bless.